The cinema maestro was only 16 when his life changed forever. 6 decades on, the Fabelmans director gets personal. When Steven Spielberg was 16, he found out that his mother was having an affair. He was on a camping trip with his 3 younger sisters, his father Arnold, his mother Leah and Bernie, Arnold's best friend. As passionate about filmmaking as a teenager as he is now, Spielberg recorded everything on his Super 8. His camera caught a flirtatious moment between Leah and Bernie. It was the moment that changed his life. What was strange, he recalls, was I saw everything with my naked eye, but only believed it when I saw a frame around it later, on my editing machine. Spielberg's mother would soon marry Bernie, while Arnold, remarkably, took the blame for the divorce to protect Leah's standing with her children, a noble act that led to many years of estrangement from his son. It's a theme recurrent in so many Spielberg films. "I realized the power of cinema young," he says. "That early film I made changed my relationship with my parents, especially my mother. That was how I found out about her affair. After that, I no longer looked at her as a parent. I saw her as a human with all the vulnerabilities I saw in myself. I wish I could have had another 10 years looking at my mom as my mom, but that secret brought us together. I was as close to my mother as I've been to anyone." At 76, Spielberg is one of the grandfathers of modern cinema, along with his old friends Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola, with whom he has knocked about since his 20s. I look around the room. A monochrome vase, a wooden table stacked with books. Very little gives away how Hollywood this man is until he pops out a fat cigar at 10 in the morning. Pick your 5 favorite films by him. For me, Jaws, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, Saving Private Ryan, AI Artificial Intelligence, Minority Report. And you could name a different 5 tomorrow. Broken Homes, Et, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, War of the Worlds, Catch Me If You Can, Empire of the Sun, all feature children from broken homes. Even Saving Private Ryan is about the reuniting of a family. "It's all through my work," he says. "I couldn't be wearing a larger sign. I don't think there's a film I've made that doesn't confront complicated issues of identity." Does he think people missed such messages? "I frankly never thought they cared much about my life because they cared more about the stories. I don't think they cared that E.T. is about 3 kids whose father is no longer at home," he says. "That began as my divorce story, then morphed into what it is. A visitor who puts a broken family back together. Then in Close Encounters, the boy catches his dad crying, so screams, 'Cry baby.' That happened when I was 10 and saw my father crying. But viewers were more interested in the mothership." Popping Spielberg on the therapist's couch, I ask whether making movies was a way for him to assert control over fictional family lives in a way that he did not have as a child. "Making movies gives you the false sense of security and a delusion of grandeur you have control," he says, "but none of us have any control whatsoever." The power of cinema. Spielberg's favorite film is David Lean's epic Lawrence of Arabia. He saw it when he was a teenager and almost gave up. He simply thought he could never make a film as good. I still haven't. There must, though, have been a time when he thought, maybe, just maybe, he was good enough? It was probably after Jaws, he says of his 1975 shark blockbuster. "It made me see what a movie could do to an audience." Still, it stays with him. He rewatches it every year. Which of his own would he suggest people see annually? "Oh gosh, I could never answer that," he says. "Sometimes, though, I wish I could see E.T. through the eyes of someone who never saw it, but that will never happen." He seems almost sad about that. Lean's film was more than just a spectacle for Spielberg. He talks about the scene most personal to him, when Lawrence gets to the canal and the British officer yells, "Who are you?" It has stuck with him through every film he's made. The film cuts to the big close-up of Lawrence, Spielberg enthuses, listening to the question he's been asking about himself, but failing to know the answer to. That's what we do when we make movies. Sometimes we just stand on the other side of the canal, screaming across it, "Who am I?" All art is that. Every movie I've directed has posed the question, who am I? For a direct answer, we now have The Fabelmans, which Spielberg co-wrote with Tony Kushner after being spurred on by his wife, Kate Capshaw. In the film, you learn that Spielberg's mother once brought home an errant monkey. You see that the first film he shot involved crashing a train set. You also learn that young Steven was bullied at high school. It was mostly anti-Semitic, but he was an odd kid filming everything. That stuck out in the 1960s, although he never lacked in confidence. Weekends were spent with peers, messing about on his short films. I wasn't popular, he admits, but even kids who didn't like me loved making movies. The camera popularized me in school. Without it, I wouldn't have stood a chance. Now, though, film is very different. Not just in the making of it, with an iPhone to hand for the next Spielberg to shoot with, but also how audiences enjoy movies. Nobody makes films like Spielberg anymore, especially not for children. Today's films aimed at teenagers are a sugar rush of lights, CGI, and action. Spielberg trusted that they had attention spans. Nothing really happens in the first 45 minutes of Jurassic Park. Now, Hollywood thinks otherwise. Kids today do have the attention if they give it a chance, Spielberg says. He knows that cinema has more competition than before. What kids today don't have as much as the kids of my generation is the patience for idle, quiet, contemplative time away from any kind of activity. That is what's lacking, patience. But if you can compel someone to watch something, I tell him that my children, aged 8 and 5, enjoyed Close Encounters and E.T., and he is delighted. A third generation of fans snared. That makes me really happy. Vital message. We end where we started, on the power of cinema. Other than showing The Fabelmans to his sisters, the film that Spielberg was most nervous about screening was Schindler's List. He made it for Holocaust victims and says he needed the support and edification of Jews who made it through. That is his most important film, but he is more worried than ever by anti-Semitism. The end, in which survivors visit the grave of Schindler, the German who saved them, was tagged on late, after the director feared people would not believe the story he had told. Holocaust denial was on the rise again. That was the entire reason I made the movie in 1993, he says. That ending was a way to verify that everything in the movie was true. He sighs. I have never made a movie that so directly confronted a message I thought the world needed to hear. It had a vital message that is more important today than it even was in 1993, because anti-Semitism is so much worse today than it was when I made the film. He also made Schindler's List as a tribute to his parents and the family's Judaism, which he had shied from when it made him a teenage punching bag. That film, like all he does, was looking to answer, who am I? Now, The Fabelmans is the director's most who am I film yet. It ends with a great scene in which an irascible John Ford barks career advice at Spielberg in the 1960s. The director laughs. He enjoys that memory, and there are plenty more where that came from. One aside is about not liking The Shining when he first saw it and how annoyed that made Stanley Kubrick. What a life! With his hero Ford in mind, what advice would he give budding filmmakers now? Tell stories that interest you, he insists, without a pause. Don't tell stories you think will be interesting to others. And he is not done yet, either with his career or his advice. But the most important thing is moving on to the next one, he says, restlessly. There is nothing more important than moving on.